Our journey starts over the Isles of Scilly, at the very southwest tip of Britain. The rugged coastline of Cornwall takes us to the historic Falmouth Bay, whose fortresses have guarded the harbour entrance for centuries. And nestled in an abandoned clay pit, we find an extraordinary ecological experiment, the Eden Project near St Austell. Passing Plymouth Harbour and the biggest naval dockyard in Europe, we reach the Jurassic Coast, one of the most important fossil sites on Earth. And we end our journey over some of the finest sailing waters in Europe at Weymouth Bay. This lonely lighthouse stands on the furthest west point of mainland Britain. Beyond it is the vast Atlantic Ocean connecting Britain with America, 3,500 kilometres away. Up until 1992, this lighthouse was manned by a crew who would spend weeks at a time marooned out here. In earlier days, a small boat would have delivered the crew as well as provisions, often in heavy seas. Today there's a helipad on top so that engineers can get here quicker and more safely to carry out routine maintenance. Although these rocks give a clue as to why a lighthouse was necessary, its presence has a particular significance, because it's the site of one of the worst disasters in British maritime history. On the 22nd of October 1707, an entire naval fleet ran off course in a ferocious storm, resulting in the loss of over 2,000 lives. As necessary as a lighthouse was, building on Bishop Rock proved to be a tough challenge, and it wasn't until 1858 that one was finally erected, using 2,500 tons of granite. Today, boat trips bring visitors to see this impressive structure that's the second tallest lighthouse in Britain, and is often referred to as the King of Lighthouses. Bishop Rock is one of over 140 islands that make up the Isles of Scilly, around 45 kilometres from the English mainland. It is likely that the isles were once much larger, with many of them joined. Rising sea levels flooded the central plain around the 5th century, forming an archipelago. Today, St Mary's is the largest of 5 inhabited islands, whose chief income is from tourism. Accessible by air and ferry, the Isles of Scilly draw visitors keen to enjoy the sunny local climate, blue seas and golden beaches. The most picturesque of the islands is Tresco. Despite Britain's reputation of being cold, wet and windy, the island boasts a subtropical garden full of palm trees and a greater diversity of plants than the southern Mediterranean. This is the passenger service that flies between the Isles of Scilly and the British mainland. Flying began in the 1960s and is the longest running helicopter service in the world. The journey lasts about 20 minutes and it's a great way of looking out for dolphins. The first sighting of England's coastline is Land's End in the county of Cornwall. This granite crag is the most extreme westerly point of mainland England and a very popular place to visit. It's considered to be one of the most spectacular coastal strips in Britain, with dramatic rock formations such as the Armed Knight and Ennis Dodnan, the famous rock arch. Just offshore is Longship's lighthouse, guarding these treacherous rocks that have caused shipwrecks for centuries. Stories of the 18th century tell of local people living off the plunder from the cargoes that washed ashore from the wrecks. They became known as wreckers. They were said to occasionally stand on cliffs or shore at night and shine lanterns out to sea, imitating lighthouse signals. Unsuspecting ships were lured onto the rocks, where waiting teams of wreckers would loot them. The penalties, if caught, were severe: transportation for life or death by hanging. Today, the cliffs are a wild and beautiful place to walk and watch the enormous variety of seabirds. Ahead is the ferry to a magnificent residence in the 1650s. From the air, it's a dramatic sight. However, for the unwary visitor, the incoming tide cuts off the island and can cause a few problems getting back to the mainland. A little-known fact about St. Michael's Mount is that the tower on top was used as an early lighthouse by using a fire lit in a brazier. And in 1588, when an invading Spanish fleet was sighted, the fire was lit in a chain of beacons that warned not only the fleet stationed along the coast, but also Queen Elizabeth I in London, 400 kilometres away. And from one form of signalling to another that launched mankind into the modern age of telecommunications 300 years later. This is Poldhu Point, where a simple stone monument marks one of the greatest events in history. It was here on December the 12th, 1901, that the first ever radio message crossed the Atlantic to Canada and was picked up at Signal Hill, St. John's, Newfoundland. It was a simple 3 dots for the letter S in Morse code. The man who achieved this incredible breakthrough was the brilliant Italian electrical engineer Guglielmo Marconi. He housed his workforce in this large white building overlooking the sea, which later became a hotel. The transmitting station itself was dismantled in 1933, and all that remains are these concrete foundations. Today, a small museum commemorates the event and is run by the Poldhu Amateur Radio Society. And only 6 kilometres away, a site was chosen for another historic transmission that Marconi could only have dreamt of. In the early hours of Wednesday the 11th of July 1962, the first ever transatlantic signals were relayed via satellite to a dish nicknamed Arthur. From there, the installation grew to become one of the largest communication centres in the world, with over 60 dishes. The Goonhilly Satellite Earth Station. Over the years, Goonhilly played a key role in historic events, such as the Muhammad Ali fights and the 1969 moon landing. But sadly, the dishes we see today are relics of the past, because in 2006, all satellite operations were shut down in favour of a newer station. It seemed like the end of an era for Goonhilly, but in a surprising turn, it was announced that the giant dishes will be refurbished to be used as radio telescopes by astronomers and for communications with future space missions to Mars and beyond. Following the coast, we arrive at one of the deepest natural harbours in the world, Falmouth. With its sheltered waters, it's long been popular with boaters and is famous for being used as the start and finish line for round-the-world sailing records. Today, the busy port is an important part of the town's economy, just as it's been for centuries. And guarding both sides of the mouth of the harbour are reminders of less peaceful times, when naval attacks by the neighbouring Spanish and French were a continual threat. These two splendidly preserved 16th century castles were the work of the Tudor king, Henry VIII, whose architects introduced revolutionary new designs to military buildings, like Pendennis Castle on the west side. Its circular wall enabled cannon positions all the way round to protect the harbour entrance, as well as fire on ships that slipped through. Across the harbour, to the east, is St Maur's Castle, built in the 1540s. It's a typical example of a Tudor fort and still retains its original shape of a clover leaf. Ironically, neither castle fired a shot against an invasion from the sea, which they were designed for. Instead, they were stormed and taken from a land attack during the Civil War of the 17th century, something the Tudor architects hadn't counted on. Fishing was once a major industry in Cornwall, dating back to medieval times, but its heyday was in the 19th century, before gradually going into decline from overfishing in the 20th century. However, many villages along this coast continue the proud tradition, like Mevagissi, nestled in a picturesque bay. Though much of its income is now from tourism, over 60 registered fishing vessels still work from this port. Not far from the coast, these fertile farmlands are interrupted by the extraordinary sight of one industry that's still going strong today: the St Austell clay pits. With the exception of China, Cornwall enjoys almost a world monopoly for the highest quality, pure white clay that's vital in the making of fine porcelain, as well as paper. China clay, or kaolin, is only found in a few places around the world, and it was first discovered here in Cornwall at the turn of the 19th century. Since then, its continual extraction has left this enormous lunar-style landscape. High-pressure water jets wash the kaolin deposits away in this milky stream. It's then separated, processed and stored before being exported around the world. Over 200 years of quarrying in the area has left giant land scars, but one abandoned pit now contains exciting new life. The Eden Project, one of the most ambitious ecological experiments ever undertaken. These greenhouses, or biomes as they are called, are the largest in the world, containing between them 100,000 plants, covering hundreds of species. The biomes house two different climates. One is humid and tropical, the other recreates the warm, temperate regions of the world. These domes are not covered in glass, but a special transparent foil that's both stronger and lighter. The material is also self-cleaning, using the force of natural rainfall. The aim of the Eden Project is to promote understanding of the relationship between plants and mankind. With more than 1 million visitors each year, it seems people are getting the message. Back along the coast, headed east, is one of the world's largest and most spectacular harbours, Plymouth. This famous port is best known for two great historic events. It's said that in 1588, the great naval commander Sir Francis Drake was playing a bowling game on the very green where he was told about an approaching Spanish fleet. Legend has it that he insisted on finishing the game before setting off to lead his ships to a decisive victory. It was also from this harbour in 1620 that the Pilgrim Fathers set sail for the New World in the Mayflower. The 102 men, women and children on board were to found the first European settlement in America, a place they named Plymouth Colony. This harbour has been serving the Royal Navy for over 300 years, and today Plymouth is home to one of the largest naval dockyards in Europe. With over 5,000 shipping movements each year, almost every type of naval vessel can be spotted here, from submarines to minesweepers. Along this great stretch of rocky coastline is a place that has a special connection with the best-selling crime writer of all time, Agatha Christie. This is Burr Island, home to a wonderful Art Deco hotel from the 1930s. It's where Agatha Christie set two of her detective novels, And Then There Were None, and the Hercule Poirot mystery, Evil Under the Sun. The island is cut off at high tide, and a specially built sea tractor is used to get guests across the causeway. During the first half of 1944, much of this south coast of England was used to launch the historic D-Day invasion of occupied France, which eventually led to the defeat of Nazi Germany. This is Slapton Sands in Devon, a section of coast that's remembered for a tragic event during this period. It was along here that 749 US servicemen lost their lives during a training exercise for the D-Day landings. 9 German fast patrol boats broke the Allied defensive barrier at night and attacked the unarmed landing craft carrying tanks and men. It was one of the highest losses of life suffered by the US Army and Navy in World War II at one time. A Sherman tank, which was sunk in this action, was recovered from the sea in 1984 and now stands close to the beach as a memorial to those who perished. Just beyond this picturesque headland is the port and resort town of Teignmouth. It also boasts one of the most dramatic stretches of railway line in England and is a tourist attraction in its own right. This high-speed express is running along a section of railway line originally built in the mid-19th century by one of the world's greatest engineers, Isambard Kingdom Brunel. He built this section by carving it into the red sandstone of the Devon coast. At high tides, the train ride can be alarming as the sea often crashes against the seawall and sprays the carriages. However, such a thrilling ride isn't without its hazard. The railway company invests over $800,000 a year to prevent landslips, which have caused line closures many times in the past. In fact, this whole section of Dorset coast is well known for landslides. One of the biggest took place in 1839, when, after a prolonged period of rain, 8 million tons of rocks, supporting 2/3 of a square kilometre, collapsed into the English Channel. Between the chasm and the shore, an isolated area of land was formed, which is now known as Goat Island. Over time, trees and other plants have grown up in the fault line, creating a dense self-sown forest that thrives in the shelter of the higher cliff. Named Mary Anning, from what was then the major port town, Lyme Regis. In 1811, when she was only 12, Mary Anning discovered the first complete skeleton of an ichthyosaur in the nearby cliffs. She went on to devote her life to the study of fossils and contributed to major advances in the early science of paleontology. Today, just as in Mary Anning's time, these crumbling cliffs continue to reveal treasures for the thousands of fossil hunters who come and dig each year. Ahead is Golden Cap, the tallest cliff on the south coast of England, and it can enjoy spectacular views of the Jurassic coast, including one of the great natural wonders of England, Chesil Beach. It's a 29-kilometre slim stretch of shingle formed by strong tides over thousands of years, which has also created an inland sea lagoon. For centuries, locals have fished off the beach, and it's said that at night they were able to tell where they were by the size of pebbles, which grew gradually larger from one end of the beach to the other. At the end of Chesil Beach is Portland Harbour, one of the largest man-made harbours in the world, and a haven for water sports. The history of Portland Harbour goes back centuries, and until recently was a major naval base. It took over 50 years to construct the breakwater, which was completed in 1905, using thousands of prison convicts to carry out the grueling work. One function of the breakwater was to defend the ships of the world's greatest navy, and this could be seen with the defensive forts at the entrances. This imposing structure took 25 years to build and is clad with iron half a metre thick. And the millions of tons of stone that was used to build the breakwater came from a quarry that couldn't have been closer. Portland Bill. Prized for its hardness and colour, the first ever recorded use of Portland stone was over 1,000 years ago. Since then, it's been used extensively by many illustrious architects for elegant and prestigious buildings worldwide. The United Nations building in New York was built using Portland stone, as was Buckingham Palace in London. At the farthest end of Portland Bill are 3 lighthouses that have, over a period spanning 300 years, served to warn ships of the dangerous waters around the headland. As well as the undersea rocks, this is where 2 powerful sea currents clash, making this stretch a graveyard for ships that fail to reach the harbour. Only one of the lighthouses is now operational, with the older 2 towers serving as a bird observatory and a field centre. And finally, from some of the most feared waters to some of the most desired. On the other side of the harbour is Weymouth Bay, that's renowned for having the best sailing waters in Northern Europe. It's hosted some of the most prestigious sailing events in the world, from World Championships to the 2012 Olympics. It attracts some of the finest vessels in the world, like this elegant training ship. It's a great sight and a magnificent way to end this journey.